Started. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session, which is Agile Recruiting and in Remote and Hybrid Organizations. So, my name is Miriam Chamberlain. I am one of the event hosts today. I am a collaborating partner, HR consultant, HR leader, working with Jeff and Hadon at Scale HR. It is my absolute pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Candace Giesbrecht. Candace is the director of the Remote Performance Academy with Teamit.com. Teamit is a leader in modern talent strategy, helping growth-focused companies recruit, cultivate, and sustain high-performing remote teams. Candace is a strategic HR coach and consultant with over 25 years of senior leadership experience in both the non-for-profit and private sectors. With experience in social work, HR, and organizational leadership, she has a broad and deep toolbox to draw from. Her passion is helping leaders and organizations of all sizes to find the sweet spot between excellence in employee experience and business success. Candace has a bachelor's of social work from the University of Victoria and a graduate certificate in strategic HR management from Royal Roads University, a chartered human resources professional, and a certified Agile people ops coach. She and her family, including 2 rescue dogs, live in the beautiful Okanagan Valley, where they love riding motorcycles, hiking, and paddleboarding. I'm going to turn this over to Candace in just a moment, but just to highlight a couple features, which I'm sure most of you are already familiar with, but we do have a chat function, so feel free to put your comments, chat. We want to keep this as engaging as possible throughout the event, so please put them into the chat function. There will be some time at the end of the session that we will be, I'll be moderating a Q&A session. So please put any questions that you may have for Candace at the end. And if anyone's brave enough to want to engage throughout the presentation, you can put your hand, there's a raised hand feature. So you can raise your hand and Candace will definitely be happy to welcome you on stage. I can help facilitate that as well. And one final note is just to inform everyone that this session today is being recorded. So Candace, I will turn this over to you at this time. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Miriam. Can you hear me okay? Everything's good? Okay. So, and thanks to Scale HR for including me in the social HR camp. I'm very excited and very passionate about this topic. The kicker is with this topic, as I was telling Miriam, I probably have about 20 hours worth of stuff that I would love to share. And yet in this time, what's the 1 or 2 things that are going to be the most meaningful for you? And so, as Miriam said, I really do hope that you will raise your hand, that you will interrupt me. There will be a few points where I would just love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. So please feel free to do that. And I look forward to interacting with you on this important topic. So I don't know about you, but when I first started recruiting, which was in the beginning of my career, it was more than 25 years ago. And every time I say that, I feel so old. But I felt like it was kind of like a chess game. Like I just need to know the moves. I just need to know the board, the landscape. And then I just kind of like make it all happen. I just needed to learn the ropes. What I found was that it was actually more like a game of Pac-Man. And with me running around trying to get to all the corners that I was supposed to get to. And meanwhile, I kept getting hit out of nowhere by these ghosts like candidates dropping off, candidates ghosting me, changing priorities, execs who wanted to be involved in the recruiting process, but then ended up, frankly, causing more problems than help. I wonder if any of you can relate to that. But indeed, what it needs to be is more like a garden. And every time I kind of say this garden piece, I feel a little part of me, going like, really, a garden? This particular metaphor is not original to me. And in fact, there's a very smart person who wrote an awesome book called Team of Teams, General Stanley McChrystal. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. He wrote about his experience in leading the military efforts to take down Al-Qaeda. And what they found was that everything, the centuries of expertise that they had about military strategy, didn't apply anymore. The terrorist groups were changing too quickly. They were organically evolving. And what he found was that he needed to take a much more holistic and a much more organic approach. And and it strikes me when I think about the recruiting landscape, when I think about talent acquisition in these times, that there's a lot of wisdom here. And so, so I'd like to just kind of, kick off our discussion here as well, with this quote. And so Gary Hamel, he wrote a book called The Future of Management in 2007. And so he said, your company has 21st century tech-enabled business processes, but is still using mid 20th century management processes. And all of that is built atop 19th century management principles. If we were to insert HR processes in this, do you agree or disagree? Is HR using 21st century tech-enabled business processes, 20th century HR processes, and 19th century HR principles?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're living in a VUCA world, and so I'd love to hear from participants. And so I see that there's just a few of us right now, which is okay. But 1, 2, or 3, just pop it into the chat. Which of these do you most resonate with? Is it attracting top talent, and providing that awesome candidate experience, learning from the past, delivering results in the present, and preparing the future, or improving our processes without burning out? Which one of these resonates the most for you? Or is there something else that's really on your mind?
Candace, I put in the attract top talent just because of how
Okay.
competitive the landscape is right
Totally.
now.
Yeah.
And we've been hearing that common theme throughout the session today. Just the number of, even just the sheer number of recruiters that are that we're looking for today to help us find these types of positions that everyone's looking to recruit and also attract. So like the HR branding that stands behind that. But
Totally.
it's so competitive that I feel like that's kind of top of mind right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so let's keep moving through this stuff, and so today, what we're gonna do is explore an evidence-based model that focuses on reducing the negative impacts of distance. I'm also going to introduce some agile talent acquisition principles and cadences to you. And if there's time, then I'll also introduce some remote competencies. Now, I think it's possible that we might not get to the remote competencies. And so if people are interested at all in hearing what the remote competencies are and we don't get to them, then please just reach out to me, and I am so happy to share them with you. So so my contact information will be available at the end of the presentation. But would love to chat with anybody if for some reason we don't get through all of the information. And so what we want to do for this next little part is to understand the impact of distance on the talent acquisition cycle. So the title of this session is Agile Recruiting in Remote and Hybrid Organizations. And I thought before we talk about the recruiting stuff and the agile recruiting, it's worth us just checking in about the context of our remote and hybrid organizations and how that impacts our talent acquisition cycles. And so, so I would love to, I'm so excited to introduce you to this model, which comes from Dr. Karen Sobel-Lejeski. She's an author, researcher, and she's got an amazing book called The Power of Virtual Distance. In her book, what she describes is the results of some research that she did where she was trying to understand the impact of distance on, in particular, productivity and happiness. But I think that I really believe that her model applies to recruiting in today's VUCA world. And it's prudent for us to understand it. And so as she went to study the impact of distance, what she was surprised to discover is that there was more than one kind of distance. So initially she was looking at physical distance, so people working apart. But what she discovered is that there are actually other kinds of distances as well. And so this is honestly, in my view, groundbreaking. And so initially she was studying this physical distance, as we talked about, but what she also discovered is that there's something called operational distance. So operational distance, which is on the bottom right of this triangle. So operational distance refers to the impact of our processes. So when our processes are bad, when our processes are inefficient, or when our processes aren't really designed with the person, with the end user in mind, then that creates distance, and it creates, a less than ideal experience for the people who are on the other side of it. And then the other kind of distance that she discovered is what she called affinity distance. So affinity is that sense of like how I feel like I belong, interdependence. Do I have affinity with this person? Do I feel like they've got my back and I've got theirs? That resonance and that sort of chemistry, kind of thing that can happen. I'm curious, and I see some more people joining, which is awesome. Welcome. And so I encourage you to just pop into the chat. Which one of these do you think has an impact on candidate experience, the greatest impact on candidate experience through the recruiting cycle? Okay, I'm seeing some answers coming up. So all have impact, but operational distance would have the biggest impact on experience. Candidate experience, a virtual distance. So yeah, virtual distance actually has all of them pulling together. That's right. Affinity distance, I believe. So Ash, Jeff is volunteering you to come on stage.
So that's good. Yeah, I would say operational distance has a huge impact because I do a lot of remote recruitment. Thanks, Jeff. I do a lot of recruitment, so I would say that operational impact distance has an impact. But when you're hiring people, especially maybe like I do a lot of recruitment in other countries, affinity distance plays a big role. So like being able to connect with the person across cultures is really important. And just especially engineers are very similar in terms of their skill sets. So and they have a lot more in common, engineers, with each other, and rather than even myself, say, with an engineer. And so just being able to connect them to the job, but also to like the culture of the organization, and making them feel like, hey, this is going to be a great opportunity for you. I think for me, affinity distance is the most important. Operational distance, yeah, that's once the person comes into the job. So I always advise clients to improve their remote first practices. But when you're doing recruitment, I think it's affinity. That's just my opinion.
Okay. And, we definitely had some, a case to be made, and all of these do have an impact. So, there's no right or wrong here at all. So operational distance, would anybody like to speak to how operational distance is, impacts that recruiting experience, that candidate experience?
There you are, Ash. Did you want to elaborate further?
I think that maybe there was Jennifer Jackson said that operational distance.
Oh, okay, we lost him. So Jennifer, are you willing to come up and talk about operational distance?
Thinking about my world, so I work for a municipality. Operational distance is a big thing for us because our processes are slow, and we know very well that impacts the candidate experience and how engaged individuals are in the recruitment experience. So for us, just getting someone through the process, I think, is our biggest challenge right now.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on and sharing that, Jennifer. I've definitely, I don't know if maybe some of you, I won't call anybody out on this, but I'll just say, like, oh my gosh, the people who sometimes want to be involved in the recruitment is like, on the one hand, I want to engage like cross-functional, people and make it a really inclusive experience internally. However, if that process means I lose great candidates because it's too slow, then it gets to be really hard, and that becomes part of the experience that candidates go and tell, like, oh my gosh, prepare yourself for their process, right? And so, certainly on the recruiting side at TeamIt, a lot of the work that we do is coaching organizations to improve that process distance that can result in just a bad candidate experience. And so I like alliteration, and I also, I like things that are easy to remember. And so I've simplified this to people, place, and process. And so as we look at the people, place, and process model, so affinity, physical, and operational, which we've talked about, like, where these create the most challenges. But what the research showed that Karen did was it showed that, and so again, in this case, what she was researching was the impact of distance on productivity and happiness. But what she found was that operational distance had double the negative impact that physical distance did. Double. So, and then affinity distance had 4 times the impact of that physical distance did, again on productivity and happiness. Now she wasn't studying recruiting, so I want to be very true to what these circles do represent. They're about productivity and happiness and the impact of distance. But I don't know. I sort of feel like if we were to repeat her research and very specifically focused on candidate experience, do you think we'd find similar impacts? What was the question? So if we were to repeat the research that Dr. Karen Sobel-Lejeski did, and applied it very specifically to the recruitment process, then would we find the same results? That the distance created by bad processes and the distance created by just lacking that connection or building that rapport, would we find that it would be in these sort of ratios? What do you think?
So you broke up quite a bit for me. Are you able to type the question in the chat just so I can understand the question? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Is that okay? Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here actually, Jeff, because I know you and I work with, with our client groups. And, what I'm finding too is I would maybe put operational a little larger, maybe more of an emphasis on that. And the reason why I say that is just because of our current situation with, what we've experienced over the last 2 years, a lot of uncertainty, economic factors, external factors we have no control over that are affecting small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses as well, but we obviously deal more with the SMB space. So that process itself is almost allowing some of our clients to kind of be a little unsure sometimes on do we recruit more now in preparation? Do we hold off? And then as a result of that, we're, in a competitive landscape on recruiting, we have, some candidates that could be waiting quite a bit of time before they get a response back on whether or not there is the right time to, fill the role with the client. So I think just with a lot of uncertainties right now, I would put a lot of emphasis on the operational process being a little bit more emphasized. I don't know, Jeff, if you would agree, but kind of more.
Yeah, I do agree with that actually. I totally agree with that. I mean, it's no, I mean it's a hard one because as Ash just mentioned, he's absolutely correct. But there's so many different ways that we can recruit people. I mean, it's not just the application process. It's not just about waiting for a resume to come in. And frankly, I've been an advocate for the last probably more than 5 to 7 years that frankly the job posting should just die.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, and I only use a job posting because it's content, right? So you got to be able to share something. So that's just one piece of content. But nowadays, recruiting is 24/7. It's constant, relationship building. Similar to what sales people do. It's a nurturing relationship. So I don't know. I mean, it's that's why taking more of a proactive approach is always the best way instead of waiting until you need to hire someone and sort of reacting. So I think that's what Miriam alluded to. Because we have a client that's sort of very reactive, and it's hard because you're always stopping, going, and you can't do that. You can't afford that anymore. So
yeah. Awesome. And thanks for your comments both in the chat and Miriam and Jeff hopping in. What we want to focus in on just for this next part of our session is this operational piece. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's processes. People need to submit somehow. They need to be, they're up, they're qualified. Are they qualified or not? How do they? There is a process, And while we're, really need the capacity and creativity of being able to focus on the affinity piece, and we're challenged potentially by the physical piece. Ash, you're recruiting across oceans, right? Like there's a lot of physical things that we can't fix. There is this huge opportunity to really shrink this middle operational process distance piece. If we can shorten that, if we can improve it, if we can make sure that our processes create as little friction in the process as possible, then there's a tremendous opportunity. And with my HR hat on, well, it's on the whole time, but this is also an opportunity for us to collaborate with our internal clients. So if we're recruiting for this team over here, this is the opportunity to say, okay, let's really look at our processes and make sure that our processes, first of all, aren't hurting us in getting that best candidate, because if they're top talent, then they're going to be comparing processes and thinking, oh, it felt so good. Oh, I love their process. And they talk, like, let's be honest. And so we want to be reducing that friction. We want to be improving it, but it's also that chance to really connect with that internal hiring manager or our internal client, and so it's a great chance to collaborate as well. So what I want to propose is adding some agile processes to your talent acquisition processes as a way of reducing friction and improving your outcomes. And so that's what we're going to talk about for the remainder of our time. So we're talking about Agile. There's lots of people talking about Agile, and yet I think it's worth us just taking a couple quick minutes to just get on the same page in terms of what we're talking about when we're talking about Agile. So in software development, in the early days, software was developed using the waterfall method. So what we would do was we would build out, as if I was a software engineer, I am not, but they would map out every single step, every single feature, and come up with like the entire process end to end before launching a thing. The downside to doing that is that often by the time products were released, there were already competitors who had released sooner, or the technology had advanced, or there were bugs that they hadn't even thought of, and they could have spent 2 years working on developing everything before releasing it to the public. And maybe there's some feedback from some of their users that go, why did this feature that an engineering team spent a ton of time on isn't even important to the user? And so Agile came as a result of a desire to release more quickly. Well, I've got a little slide here, to shorten the amount of time before releasing. So short iterative cycles and sprints. And the iterative piece here is very, very important, because you want to do a bit, get it out there, test and iterate. So that's the first piece. Deliver value rapidly. Every sprint is one of the tenets of agile development. And so when we're looking at defining what's the thing we're sprinting on, what's the thing that we're going to accomplish quickly and deliver and release, where's their value? Where's the highest value is part of the criteria. And there's other criteria that they look at as well. Iterative learning and continuous improvement. And so iterative learning is more agile. Continuous improvement actually is typically associated more with lean. So lean is about reducing friction, maximizing efficiencies, and so on. And so just that continuous improvement, we're always trying to improve. The next piece here is cross-functional collaboration between teams, which is what we do as HR, right? HR and people ops, P&C professionals. We are coming alongside, we're the wiring in the stove that's coming alongside of everybody who's doing their work, and we help and support them to do their best work. And then delivering value and delight to the customers. And so in the case of recruiting, we know that we've got multiple customers, don't we? We have the internal hiring manager that are customers. We have the team that these, candidates are going to be working alongside with as customers. We have the execs, the C-suite, who are our customers, and we also have the candidates. And so when we're thinking about looking at increasing or adding agile processes or making our recruiting processes more agile, then these are the pieces that we want to consider looking at. So if you look at your recruiting processes, which one of these 5 do you feel like, okay, we hit that, or which ones do we hit this out of the park? And which ones do we feel like maybe we could use a little bit of improvement? I'm going to just pause for a second, and I'm not going to call you up on stage, or if you want to put it in the chat, by all means, but I'm just going to actually give you a second to reflect. Short iterative cycles, sprints. So do you sprint toward those, filling those roles, or, sort of focusing on certain kinds of recruiting? When you're sprinting, are you delivering value rapidly? Where are you slow? Where are you fast? How and where and how often are you learning and continuously improving your processes? Where are you providing that cross-functional collaboration between the teams? Where can you be more inclusive, or where do you feel like, no, we actually do really well, and give yourself a pat on the back? And where are you delivering value and delight to customers? Learning and iterating is something I think we can do well, Ash. Awesome. So I just encourage you to keep that in mind as we move forward. So I thought, I love a good case study. I love a good case example, because we usually set things up and then wait as recruiters. Yeah. Ash, did you want to come on stage and tell us a little bit more? No, please no. Haha. Okay, fair enough. Okay, we'll move on to the case examples. It's all good. So there are a couple of companies that I think you've probably heard of who have decided to make their recruiting processes more agile, and to actually take some agile software development principles and apply them to their recruiting processes. So you may have heard of GE. So General Electric decided that they were going to take what software developers know about good agile development, and they were going to apply it to their recruiting processes. So their recruiting includes 4 key elements. So they have a recruiting Scrum team. So they've decided to use Scrum purely and apply the principles to their talent acquisition. And what that means is that they have a Scrum Master. So someone who is trained in sort of the cadences and helping to prioritize the process, and really ensuring kind of the Scrum Master is like the captain of the processes. There's a headcount owner. So, if we've got big headcounts that we need to accomplish, or, then there's somebody who's there just sort of championing that customer need, or that particular, internal unit need. And then technology. And so, in our processes, we have our technology. And so there's a tech owner that's present as well. So in order to be successful, they have a process that they prioritize their requisitions. Now, this is a very large company, and this might be like, oh my gosh, I can't even relate to this. But if you have multiple job orders, then where is there the greatest risk? And risk could be defined in a bunch of different ways. Risk of losing more people if we don't fill that, risk of burning out our existing people if we don't fill that, risk because there's not a lot of talent out there, and if we don't get this figured, then our competitors are going to swallow us up. Just where is there risk? The complexity and size of the requisitions and the teams. And so, just there's some factors that they have, and I'm not internal, so I don't totally know what that means, but they've got a complexity and size factor. Where are their dependencies? So is one requisition dependent on the other? So sometimes we need to hire this person before we can fill that role. And so just factoring in where are their dependencies is a part of how they prioritize their requisitions. And also, where's their business value? And then they use Scrum meetings and a Kanban board. If you're not familiar with that, then I can definitely share some resources with you. And how do we measure performance? So put this in place. But the big question is, what are the results? Well, how about 54% higher customer satisfaction? They are filling in 3 to 6 week cycles, and they saw an improvement of 70%. 70% faster results in hiring by taking this approach. Like if it wasn't from like a company like them where I feel like, okay, they're going to stand behind their results, like I'd be like, no, come on, like you're exaggerating, really. But they measured it. Like they really measured it. IBM did the same thing. So they decided to measure and add Agile. And they also created a measurement around the addition of some AI into their recruiting processes. So first of all, by taking their recruiting process and putting it into an Agile framework, they went from 85 days to fill to 45. Mm-hmm. Like, are any of you are picking your jaws up off the floor? Because like I sure was. And then when they added some bots, and added some artificial intelligence to some of their processes as well, they saw a further reduction, just in terms of getting things. Now again, IBM, a very large company, but is it possible that if any of us even put some pieces of Agile recruitment or Agile methodologies into our recruitment processes? Like, what would you even see? Like, what would you do with 10% more time? like 4 more hours in a week? Are you kidding me? Or in a month, right? Like, I think we all know what we would do with that, and so the results speak for themselves. So one of the questions that I often hear is, where do I start? And so don't get overwhelmed by this diagram. There's these three red squares are the points where I want to just invite you to consider. So the first thing here is backlog. And that's just your to-do list. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I go, oh my gosh, like I've got 4 different lists in 12 different places. And so as a team, can you pull all of the requirements into one place? Are all the requirements for recruiting in one place? And so really doing a good job of actually having a central place where your backlog is kept. The second piece here, the second red square, it says sprint. And so when you focus and sprint towards something, and rather than trying to fill 20 roles all at once, you focus on filling 3. When you go for it and you focus and you sprint, this is how we see the benefits and shortening those cycles. And then the sprint review, sprint retro, taking the minute, or at least 20 minutes anyways, to go, okay, we filled these 3 roles, or we finished, we found a bunch of talent, for this. What did we learn? What did we do well? What did we not? What did we set out to do? Did we do it? And how did that go? I think we're at the end of our time, aren't we, Miriam?
Yeah, we were just, I love this stuff. I think it's such a great method and so many things that we could take away here. But I would suggest, I know because we are at a time, and I'm sorry that we had a few minutes there of tech issues. But if anyone's interested to connect with Candace, please do so via LinkedIn.